Hello, this is Ms. DB. We are going to start a new unit today, and we're going to start by talking about ratios. So we'll write ratios in several ways, and we will compare ratios and order ratios. So what is a ratio? A ratio just compares two numbers or quantities. It says how much of one thing there is compared to how much there is of another thing. For example, in this image, we have 3 blue squares to 1 yellow square, so we can write a ratio as 3 to 1. So there's 3 ways to write ratios. One is using the word to, like I just said, 3 to 1. Another way is putting a colon in between the two numbers, 3, you still say 3 to 1, but you put a colon there. And the other way is to write it like a fraction, 3 over 1. If you write it like a fraction, then you have the advantage of being able to simplify the ratio, because you can use the same methods used to simplify fractions, and you can compare ratios that way. So a lot of times in math, we will write them as fractions. But for the first part of your assignment, all you need to do is write the other 2 ways that you can write the ratio that is shown. So these are all different. There's some with the word to, there's some with the colon, and there's some written as a fraction. So you just need to fill in the other 2 ways to write a ratio. For example, in number 5, another way to write that ratio would be with the word to. And the other way, there's only one more way. Let's see, we've got this one. We've got this one. We need to do the fraction one. So that would be 6 over 11. And if you're typing, of course, you can use that backslash key. 6 over 11 means the same thing. So there will be 2 answers for each of these. I wrote 3, but I was just showing the 2 ways to write a fraction. All right, now we're going to write ratios in simplest form. So to simplify means to make smaller. When we simplify, we make a fraction smaller. It's still equivalent to the larger form of the fraction. It has equal value, but it's simpler because the numbers will be smaller. So the way that we simplify a ratio is, first of all, we write it in fraction form if it's not already in fraction form. Then we are going to figure out what the greatest common denominator of both of the numbers are. Let's work through an example. So our ratio is 20 over 24. We already have it written as a fraction, so our next step then is to find the greatest common factor of both 20 and 24. So we write the factors of 20. Factors mean what do you multiply to get to 20. So you can multiply 1 times 20, so those are 2 of the factors. You can multiply 2 times 10, so there's another 2 factors, and 4 times 5 are another 2 factors. You don't have to write them in order from least to greatest like I did here, but it helps find the common factor with the 24. So now we're going to do the same thing for 24. 24 has lots of factors. 1 times 24 equals 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. Those are all factors of 24. The next step is to look for common factors. Well, they both have 1 as a factor, but so does every number. So dividing by 1 isn't going to simplify your fraction at all, and we wouldn't bother with it. I see that 2 is also a factor, so we could divide both of those fractions by 2. But before we do that, let's keep going and see if we have any more higher common factors. So 3 is in 24, but it's not in 20, so that's not a common factor. But 4 is in both of our numbers. So far that's the highest common factor. Then we have 5, but 5's not in 24. We have 6 in 24, but not in 20. 10, 12, 8. Yep, it looks like 4 is our greatest common factor. So 4 is the greatest common factor, so we are going to divide both of our numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number, by 4. So 20 divided by 4 is 5, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. So we get a simpler fraction of 5 over 6, so our ratio is 5 to 6. And that's how we simplify ratios. If you simplified fractions before, it's the same exact process. It's just that we call them ratios instead of fractions. Okay, so in 10 through 13, we are going to write the following comparisons as ratios and then simplify fractions where possible, just like we just did. So there are units on here, like 150 boys to 175 girls. We're going to ignore the units while we do the simplifying part. Let's do number 11. 150 boys to 175 girls can be written like a fraction by putting the one number on top of the other one. Now we need to find the greatest common factor. There's pretty big numbers here, so I don't really want to list all of them. So I might use something called divisibility rules, and notice that a 5 would go into both of these. 5 is a factor of both of them because one ends in 0 and one ends in 5. So I know that 5 is a factor. Let's see if we can find something bigger than 5. 10 would not be a factor because 175 does not end in 0. Probably, we can use a calculator to check too, especially with bigger numbers like this. Let's check if 15 is a factor. I'm just going to check multiples of 5. So to check if 15 is a factor of both of them, I'm trying to move my calculator over here so you can see it. I would take both numbers and divide by 15 and see if I get an integer answer. So it is a factor of our top number. Is it also a factor of our bottom number? It is not, because we got a decimal answer. So 15 is not a factor of 175. 20 would not be because the bottom number doesn't end in 0 again. Let's see if 25 is a factor of both of them. 150. If I get integer answers for both of them when I divide, then it is a factor. It is for that one. How about 175 divided by 25? I think this is going to work. It's 7. That means that 25 is my greatest common, well, it might not be the greatest, but it is a common factor. Let's divide both of these numbers by 25 using our calculator and see if the fraction that we get is as simple as it can be. So do you remember what the answers were when we did this? We took 150 divided by 25, and that was 6, okay? Then we took 175 divided by 25, and I think it was 7. Yep, it was 7. Because those numbers are right next to each other, we know that there is no other common factor. 6 over 7, there's no numbers that you could divide both of them by and get integer answers. So then this is our simplest fraction, and then that is our solution for number 11. Oh, we should go back and write our units now. This would be 6 boys to 7 girls. Okay, so there's a few of those to do. And then on these problems, there's no units, but you're going to do the same thing. You're going to write your answer as a fraction and then simplify that fraction. When you do this, most of these, you have a smaller number first, so like 4 to 12. And you will be able to find the greatest common factor using that first method where we list all of the factors of the number. So all of the factors are 4 is 1 times 4 and 2 times 2, but we only write the 2 once. And all the factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. And then you look for the common factors, which are 1, but again, we don't use 1 for a greatest common factor, 2, and 4. So 4 is the highest one, so you would divide both of these by 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then that is our ratio in simplest form. Number 16 looks different because the first number is bigger, but you still write it in the same order that they give it to you. Always for ratios, the first number goes on top when you're writing as a fraction. So you would still write this with 36 on top, 36 to 6, and then we'll look for our common factors and hopefully find the highest one, the greatest one. So 36, there's a lot of factors for 36. 1 times 36, 2 goes in there, and you can use your calculator to check, but it's 2 times 18. 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 9 is 36. 5 does not go into 36, but 6 times 6 is 36. Lots of factors. Not as many for 6. 1 times 6, 2 times 3, and that's it. So look and find your greatest common factor, and it's actually the same as one of our numbers. It's the same as our denominator, our bottom number. So when we divide both of these by 6, the bottom number is 1. The top is 6. You leave the 1 on the bottom. I know that 6 over 1 is the same as 6, but we're writing ratios here, and ratios compare two numbers. They have to have two numbers. So we need the 1 in the denominator. Another way you could write that is 6 to 1. If you didn't have the 1, what would you say? 6 to space? So you put the 1 there so that you're able to read it as a ratio. And then a bonus question for 14 through 19, write these ratios in order from least to greatest. So that will be interesting to see if you can do that. You don't have to do that question. Bonus questions don't have to be completed. All right, next we're going to write our ratios in decimal form. We would mainly do this if we needed to compare or to use that ratio in a calculation. So we are going to convert a ratio to decimal form by first writing it as a fraction, if it's not already, and then we're going to take the number on top of the fraction bar, the numerator, and divide it by the denominator. So here's an example. Write the ratio 1 to 2 in decimal form. So the first thing we do is we write it like a fraction. Second, we are going to take the top number divided by the bottom number. And I recommend using a calculator for this. So we take 1 divided by 4, and we see that the decimal number is 0.25, and that's our answer. So first write it like a fraction. Here's another example. Then get your calculator and take the top number, the numerator, divide by the bottom number, which is called the denominator, and we see that that is 1.8. So ratios can be greater than 1, like we found here. And that's okay. So then on your worksheet, you are going to change some of these, or change all of these, to decimal numbers. Let's just do one of them. Let's do number 25. 7 to 28. So our first step is to write it like a fraction. Our second step, and some of those already, like number 19 and 20 already are fractions, so you don't have to do that. And then the second step is to use your calculator and take the top number, the numerator, divided by the bottom number, which is the denominator. And then you write your decimal number. Now, I'm writing 0.25. Some of you might say, wait, it's supposed to be 0.25. You can write these either way. Whichever you learned to write decimal numbers, just keep doing that. They're both correct. All right, next we are going to compare. Compare means to decide which one is bigger and which one is smaller. So this symbol here is less than. So if the first number is smaller than the second number, then you would use less than. If the second number is larger, if the first number is larger than the second number, then you'd use greater than, and maybe you'll even get it equal. Maybe they'll be equal to each other. So you would want to write them both as fractions or both as decimals. Most students prefer to write them both as decimals, but it's totally up to you. Let's do 27 by changing them both to decimals. So 27, we have 3/8, or 3 to 8, and we have 4 to 9. So we have two fraction numbers right now. I'm going to use my calculator and change 3 to 8 into a decimal, and I get 0.375. Now I'm going to change 4 over 9 into a decimal, and I get 0.444 repeating. It's hard in Word to show that the number repeats because there's no way to write that bar over the top, no easy way. So what you can do is put ... at the end. That shows that it repeats. What you don't want to do is just write, What you don't want to do is just write 0.4. You want to show somehow that this is going to repeat. So if you are writing by hand, you can write this as 0.4 with a bar over the top. If you're typing, then type a couple of 4s, maybe 3, and then put dot, dot, dot after that. Okay, now we got to decide which one is 0.375 less than or greater than 0.444. Well, we can compare the first number after the decimal, and we see that the 3 is less than 4, so that means that 0.375 is less than 0.444. So this would be a less than sign. All right, then there's just one more kind of application problem at the end. It says, in Kyle's drawer there are 14 white socks and 8 black socks. First of all, figure out the total number of socks, and then you're going to read each of these situations and write the ratio as they say. So if they say black socks, 2 white socks, you have to put the number of black socks first and then 2 white socks. You don't have to simplify these, and you can write your ratios in any way you like. So black socks is 8. I'm going to write them using the word 2, and white socks is 14. So you can just leave it as 8 to 14, or you can write it like a fraction. If you want to simplify it, you can, but you don't have to. And that's the last question. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a wonderful